Welcome to our second key interview for today. I am Dânia. I'm here with Nicole Büttner. She's the co-founder and CEO at Merantix Labs. And I would like to welcome you, Nicole. Hi.
Hi, Dânia.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about different approaches that increase value and impact for industry clients. So, Nicole, you are a trained economist, and today you are the CEO at Merantix Labs. Can you tell us more about your journey and why you moved into tech?
Sure. So thank you very much for having me. I guess in hindsight, right? Hindsight is 2020, so it all looks a little bit like it makes sense. I think one of the messages is that from each change, from each point of time and point where I was making a change, it looked a little bit more like a bigger forking. Now it all kind of came together nicely. So I studied economics and econometrics, kind of using a lot of Stata, MATLAB, and old school data, structured time series, panel regressions, and all the panel data regressions, and so on. Mm-hmm. And I really thought I was going to end up in Africa working for the World Bank. I did internships at the World Bank and the UN, and had a job lined up in Ghana to do like Africa Impact Evaluation Initiative, so crunching data on treatment effects of policies and so on in the educational space. So really cool. I then I realized I didn't really want to move to, and then took an unexpected turn into the financial sector. Basically, started working the day Lehman Brothers went under at an asset management company in hedge fund investing. So again, data-driven field, a lot of analytics around data against structured data, right, in the financial sector. Although back then there were the first use cases of like PE funds and so on using computer vision to monitor which like the famous parking slots example, like is this mall really used, how high is the traffic, and so on to estimate the value of assets. So that was pretty cool. And I guess you would say that all the quant traders in the space were also already using data to kind of gain to have like intelligent trading algorithms. So did that, and then my real segue into tech was working again for one of my Stanford professors. I spent some time doing research at the econ department there and in the game theory space. And and we basically constructed complex auction systems from a game and auction theoretic perspective and translated that into software products. And I really love that. Kind of finally had reached a point, I think, where I felt really comfortable doing a lot of this translation work between sort of the mathematical game theoretic part and mapping it into software systems and then translating that back into the boardroom so they actually know what we're doing for them in an auction. So that was really great. And that was also my segue into machine learning, because we use it a lot in auction tracking tools, for example, and also on the computational side, because a lot of these problems are NP-hard problems, and we had these simulations that would run for 3 weeks, and we had to cut it down to 2 hours. Sorry. Yeah, that was basically the long and short. And then I started my first company in Switzerland, bringing talent into companies, and was then approached by Merantix basically to start, to contribute to the Merantix family and start this company, Merantix Labs. And really happy I did. Carried me to Berlin and to you today.
Cool. Yes, and also I think almost 1 year now you are a digital leader at the World Economic Forum, right? It seems to me then that you are kind of coming full circle, like working now to bring technologies to governments. Tell us more about this.
Yeah, so it's funny, right? Because I was talking about this full circle where I'm really, I think, in machine learning because of the impact and the sort of, I want to see, although you have adorable cats, but I want to see less cat video recommending systems and like more really socially impactful use cases. So around sustainability, around, tackling access and inequality, access to healthcare systems, right, to resources, and so on, and sort of tackling inequality. So that's really what's driving me a lot. And indeed, right, at the World Economic Forum, it provides a really good platform to interact with some of the governmental agencies, some of the political players, and big corporations to kind of understand, okay, how can we actually play a role and kind of roll out our innovative technological ideas to large organizations, right, like Boris's, who actually have the impact, right, who have the 10,000s of employees, who have the global reach, which we as Merantix, we don't have. You know, we're still a small company. And really passionate. For example, one of the circles I contribute is around the energy transition. And right there, you see there are all these big energy companies and trying to understand how to use it, for example, in cutting down, how to use machine learning, for example, in cutting down where they drill on the ocean floor, right? So understanding in 3D where are facies, so where are different types of stones, where are high pressure areas, and basically reduce the amount of drilling you do, and they completely want to stop in a few years to create new holes. So they're really trying to minimize the environmental impact. And so
yes,
they're their use cases, right, around like ultrasound data. Yeah,
it's very inspiring use cases you have there. I think it's this is something that is also very much aligned with our AI Guild value of advancing AI adoption for the benefit of humanity. I mean, maybe in our daily jobs currently, we don't have that much opportunity to work towards that social impact, but for sure it's something that we want to see more and more and be more and more involved to have more positive outcomes of the technology for social impact.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a big discussion, right, also about like the computational. I guess everybody could start doing something on thinking about how can we reduce the energy uses through more efficient, right, computational methods. I guess that's something we could probably almost do in any use case, but yeah, it's also not so straightforward.
Yeah, and maybe you can also share with us some trends that you see recently in our field regarding the technology itself.
Yeah. So I think what we're really seeing, so right, what we do at Merantix Labs, so Merantix is venture studio. We build basically new companies and new data-driven business models. And I at Merantix Labs, basically with the team, we basically bring these data-driven business models to existing companies and sort of work with different organizations of various sizes. And what we really see is when I started in the field a few years back, and I don't know, Boris probably has a similar experience, but I guess you're in the autonomous driving field. So, but I saw a lot of experimentation. So people starting to do some use cases, and now the deployment and the actual seeing financial impact or other impact in the organization is actually crucial. So the scaling is super important. And a lot of organizations are still struggling with that. So there might be like a vast use case portfolio and people are trying cool POCs and now they want more of it, but they don't really understand how do I roll this out now to the whole organization. So the whole DevOps space, I think, has been like sort of the buzzword of the year, I would say, as organizations are struggling with this. And this I hear, right, in CTO circles, I hear this at the World Economic Forum, and like really the biggest companies also with big data science teams are trying to wrap their heads around it. So I think that's bringing things into deployment to actually see the impact, right? Which is where it all started.
Yes, for sure, because this is also one of the challenges that we discussed a lot in our practitioner community. And it is what motivated us to go live with the datalift event, is to really focus on use cases that are in production, like how to make it have an impact. I mean, you cannot have an impact if you're not delivering it to the final user of your solution, right? So this is super important, and I don't think it was not so much talked about until recently. We see this trend coming up again and again.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think that it's basically, I mean, for us, the journey, we really think it's like a competitive advantage, right? To be able to quickly then scale it up. And also makes it easier, right, to then also get more funds and kind of make your make your effort get more visibility and also more budget for all the efforts, right, in data science and machine learning departments. Because once it kind of pops up on the radar of a CFO, right, because she sees, ooh, yeah, there's some impact, then all of a sudden it becomes a more important topic as well.
Yes, for sure. And I don't know if, the types of companies you're working with, but maybe you also have experience working with companies that are not data first. And do you see some specific challenges in that?
Totally. And it's really, I think, you know, what I'm trying to sort of tell also my machine. I think this is like part of like the conversation also with the machine learning team at Merantix, right? Mm-hmm. That we're very often very focused on how well the model works instead of how much impact it creates. Both are important. And so I think for like companies that are setting into it, like the impact component is most important to kind of create buy-in for people to have fun, right? In the end, it's a little bit sad. Nobody probably cares how beautiful the machine learning model was written, and, you know, maybe how accurate and so on it is, unless it has actually real world impact on their key KPIs. So, right, it's like the medical imaging example where you have like, obviously the radiologist still has a higher accuracy than the model on average, but still, if you can automate 50% of the cases, that's good impact. That's enough to already make it a really good business case within an organization, right? And we kind of try to approach it from that perspective, but you can imagine the discussion is always like, yeah, but, you know, we really think the model should be performing better. So I think that's like one of the really key messages. And you really have to kind of, right, you have all these legacy systems, you basically have legacy infrastructure. So
yes.
And you need to invest, right? It's like not cost, it's like investment horizon, and to convince people that it's a longer investment horizon than if you're gearing up some B2C consumer app is also hard, right? And you need to hang in there to kind of see these exponential returns on that investment a little bit, which can be hard, right? Internally also in organizations to justify.
Yes, and would you have any advice then for companies that are looking into making this investment? And for once, is understanding that it's a long-term investment. You need to work, let's say, from the beginning, from the foundation, like the architecture, data collection, and maybe something in the direction of data factory, like what Boris was saying before. Yeah. But what else could you advise?
Yeah, so it's like, actually, to be very honest, the more deep tech I go, and this kind of goes back to my final advice, I would say, I kind of realize that the more soft skill I also get, because often, yes, there's a tech layer that has to be addressed, right? But there's also often a cultural layer, which is a little bit unsatisfying, right? Maybe as a response, because it sounds very banal. But that's actually where we see a lot of the stuff not working out, to be very frank. So I think first is expectations, right? You always expect like this magical box. And I guess, I don't know, Boris, you were talking a lot about autonomous driving, right? It's one of those markets where expectations were super high also. Like everybody was thinking, oh, we're going to already be driving in autonomous cars. But yeah, there's just a lot to tackle in the space. And so we will not have the perfect solution day one. And it's also a cultural topic, right, about the adoption of these technologies in different regulatory environments. And then also, I think what's really important is to think about how you actually want to create impact, and what is your key KPI that you actually are measuring against. And it's often, again, sad for ML and DevOps engineers, often not the accuracy of the model. It's often about cost savings or revenue generation or customer satisfaction, or, you know.
Yeah, sometimes those are more important than our technical metrics for the model.
Yes, and I think that's an important conversation to have and to be aware of that, because sometimes we develop something that is like, oh no, I don't think we should show this to the client yet. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's like super helpful already, and it's like almost like dissatisfied in our tech team, because you can always make it better, right? And I love this. It's a very solution oriented and like perfectionists kind of culture, but then like clients are already super happy, right? And it's a good first step to then build on.
Yes, there are other things that can have impact, not only how accurate the model is, for example. Yes, and then there is a question here that came up on the chat related to measuring impact, but then about the social impact of an AI project. Are there any established KPIs?
I mean, the whole social space is kind of difficult. I mean, we kind of, for example, right? If you look at this, for example, this use case I was talking about the ocean floor and kind of trying to drill less holes, right? I mean, it's hard to measure the impact, and we are also not specialists at sort of measuring that impact, right? You know, in this whole ESG field, a lot of time and effort has been put into it, also already from an investment perspective, right? How to measure the ROI from an ESG, environmental, and etc. perspective. So I think that's kind of that's not really what we specialize in, but we're trying to understand how can we, for example, enable companies to get to that database. For example, how do we monitor environmental compliance of suppliers throughout the supply chain, for example, right? And so then we work with NLP models and we try to understand, okay, make it more scalably applicable to understand some of those metrics. I don't have like an answer for you because I don't compute this myself. Our task is to make it measurable in a scalable way, also from unstructured data, right? That's kind of
the challenge, especially. Yeah, for sure. Before you can calculate any KPIs, you have to be able to monitor and collect this data. And I guess also it changes what kind of social impact we're talking about. For example, if it's ecological, there should be some KPIs regarding the ecological impact, which is different from other sorts of impact, like education, for example, or resource sharing.
Yeah, or right, you have like, if you look at the SDG goals, for example, right, you have, for example, also access, right, to healthcare. You have economic empowerment. You have, right, and this can be realized in so many different ways, right? If all of a sudden you have a, for example, medical imaging solution that gives people access to healthcare that wouldn't have had it otherwise, you know, for me it's intuitive. You're creating positive impact, but we don't really, and actually that's maybe good input. Maybe we should be measuring this more. So thanks, Antonio, for the question. I'll be thinking about this actually.
Yeah, and I think that's also part of why data science is so interesting for people from different backgrounds, because you can really be creative how you're using the data and how you come up with solutions, but what kind of solutions you have and how you can impact people's lives with this solution. And I was thinking also about this, what you were mentioning before, the idea of misconception, maybe about AI, what AI can do or what is AI, because it was maybe created in our heads as such an incredible big thing, and also because we watch it on the movies, that it's something that will take people's job and things like that. So there are a lot of misconceptions and expectations, or wrong expectations. And how would you describe this experience, if you have had any, how to handle this kind of expectations?
Yeah, it's I mean, it's hard, right? Because, and I guess it's also hard for everybody working in an organization, because you kind of want to keep people excited about the topic and show what the potential is, but at the same time also not put yourself on this really hard spot where you have to deliver against like impossible expectations. So I mean, already if people say, and this actually happens, right, we need 100% accuracy on anything, it's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. It's like never going to happen. So if that's something you cannot let go of, we should kind of stop the conversation here. I think that's kind of important. And then I think like this impact map. So that's why I think translating things into business relevant KPIs is so important, because then you can kind of show a real roadmap of how to get somewhere. I mean, we start, when we're at companies, the ideation process really in sort of focusing on the business impact, because otherwise we realize it's, and it's also kind of Merantix DNA, because we're usually trying to build like big impactful companies. And if it doesn't have the impact we try to not really focus on that problem, because
Okay.
it will die down often. Kind of.
So it's kind of you start from the end. So you think about what impact we will have after we finish or when we come up with the solution, and then you start working on a solution that can achieve you or can get you there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that in our pre-talk, you used a phrase that stuck with both Chris and I. It was, air quotes, tango with machine learning engineers. Can you tell everyone here what you mean with that?
Yeah, the tango with a machine learning engineer. So I think it's like this problem of like it's like this giving birth problem, right? That I alluded to with creating impact. So you can always get better, and I mean we're there to really bridge to bring all these cool papers from the research and academic field really into production. Mm-hmm. And so obviously when we have a lot of our people probably like you with PhDs and obviously great academic curiosity and also developing methodologically further, it's always hard to stop and put like a full stop behind something and actually give birth and just let it grow up a little bit out there. So I think that's like one of the big tangos, I would say. And right, also we were talking about this, the dilemma of sort of sophistication of a method versus the impact, right? Sometimes the simpler stuff is actually more impactful. So, or right, and you were mentioning this, maybe you want to share this example, but yeah, sometimes it's not worth also, right, putting all this effort into creating a model.
Yeah, so I remember because for my master's, I was into the topic of recommendation systems, and there is this famous Netflix prize that happened in the early 2000s. So I think the prize itself was delivered in 2009. The idea was that Netflix at the time was still doing the DVD deliveries, and they wanted to, or they released some data set to the universities and the researchers to get a better solution for recommending or predicting the ratings for the people. And they said, well, if anyone can best our own algorithm in terms of root mean squared error, so the RMSE, this will give you $1 million. And at the end, there was a solution that was better than their solution in these terms, but in the end, they didn't adopt it or they didn't implement it because the engineering effort that was needed to implement the solution was simply not worth the increase in accuracy that they saw. And this was one of the reasons why they didn't adopt the solution. The other reason is because by then they moved the business model to streaming. Yeah, I mean, I think that in the end, what also it was a learning from this experience with the Netflix prize. I mean, everyone was asking then the question, was it worth the investment of 1 million to pay the price for an increase in the RMSE? So it shows a bit the importance of having a mixed team, like combining technical understanding, but also business skills, because maybe that was not the best way to measure the impact of the technical solution.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also, right, that's exactly also part of this tango, so to speak, to kind of think about what is, again, like the impact. I sound like a broken record, but as you say, like, what is it worth? Like, it's really worth asking, okay, what is the size of your problem now? If we could completely solve it, how much would that be worth to you? And then kind of compare that to the investment and time you have to put in to develop, train, deploy, monitor an AI model, and then see a machine learning model, and then see, is that somewhere ballpark an interesting business case or not?
Yeah. I think in the case of the Netflix prize, the data set that they released, I mean, in the end, some years later, they had to face some lawsuits because of privacy issues with the data set that they released. So I don't think it's available anymore online. Yeah. I mean, I did my master's in 2010, 2011. So it's, 10 years now. Anyways, the data that they had was about like, I don't know, 10,000. 100, yeah, 100 million. And the data set that they had in production was more than 5 billion ratings. So that's changing also the engineering effort that you have. So that was the thing. Maybe I get some more questions here from the audience. Yes, there is a question here if you have an opinion on data democratization.
So I just have a clarification question. You mean to basically, just so I understand correctly, because I'm not familiar with the term per se, so basically to make data sets available to a larger amount of people? Is that Dânia? Am I getting this right?
Yes, I think so. That's what I understand. Yeah. To
so
have
I think
more open data sets. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, right? And I have these discussions with a friend of mine who's very radical on this part. He's also based in Berlin and in the healthcare space, and right, kind of deeply convinced that all the data that we have in the healthcare sector, right, should be available to startups and to anybody who wants to innovate it. But then also the models should be basically open sourced and made completely available to everybody. And you know, there is an argument that you could say, I mean, I think yes, we need more access to data, and especially for startups, right? From a startup perspective, it's really hard to curate a data set when you're at the beginning of your journey, because you start at zero, and there's a unfair advantage of large organizations often. So I'm generally in favor, and I'm really in favor also of these data sharing and data sharing models and data ecosystems that we can create. But I think you know, it's we kind of have to find governance models where everybody can decide, do I want to contribute to this or not? In Switzerland, there's I love your cat. The black cat in the back. In Switzerland, for example, there is this data cooperative at midata.coop. And so basically, it's like everybody who contributes data is basically a stakeholder, shareholder in this cooperative. And so it's, I think, an interesting model, and its focuses on healthcare data. And I think it's an interesting model of trying to find the right governance model to still be able to decide what you want to use your data for, but still to ensure large access. And for me, the question that you're asking about when you're asking data democratization is a governance question. Because yes, I think data is useless if you keep it in your little garden. So I think if you can make it available to people who can create impactful use cases on it, that would be better. But it boils down to a governance question.
Yes, I agree. I see that also. Yeah, and like connecting again to something that Boris mentioned on his interview, like now we have a lot of open source tools available compared to what we had 10 years ago. And maybe then the issue that we have now is access to the data. So we can apply the tools we have.
Yeah, and access also to quality data, right?
Yes. There's also the question of privacy. That's why I think it's very important to have governance and more transparency so that we can understand actually what's happening with the data if we want to make it available to support more solutions, for example, in healthcare.
Yeah, sure.
I see that we have Dylan here.
Hi.
Means 1 minute left.
1 minute warning, yeah.
Thank you, Dylan.
You're awesome. I would need each and every one of my Zoom calls.
Yes, it's really good to keep us on time so people can have a break soon. But before we leave, would you share some advice to practitioners in the field that are looking to deploy more solutions?
I mean, honestly, I think and I do sound like a broken record here, but I think invest in your soft skills, right? I think selling the idea to the people in the business seat is often just as important as being able to build and deploy a really good model, right? Because if you can't, and this is like, right, for us it's relevant because we're talking to clients, we have to show impact, but also if you're in an organization, if you have the skill to kind of present it well and invest in understanding the problem really well and being able to show the impact, that gives you basically more power, right? Because it creates excitement. and it creates buy-in for your, and that makes it more likely that you can actually create impact in the organization. So I think, that would be my advice. Go invest also in your soft skills.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. Well, super interesting hearing from you. And if we now have to wrap it up, but if people want to ask you more questions, are you going to stay around to catch us back again?
Yes, I'll be here for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah. So people can find you in the networking area then.
Yeah. And if we don't get the opportunity, just connect on LinkedIn or, and drop me a message and we can kind of jump on a call or exchange thoughts.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Storytelling. Yeah. It works.
Cool. Thank you then. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much, Dânia and Nicole.